Get ready. This is called A God of Mercy. Continuing study of the life of David. Today we're going to read of the sad and tragic death of King Saul, a man whom God had greatly gifted and blessed, but who chose to turn away from the Lord. And he chose to become proud. Saul's final battle with the Philistines and his death is recorded in 1 Samuel 31, verses 3 through 6. The battle became fierce against Saul. Archers hit him. He was severely wounded by the archers. What's an archer? Yeah. We still have bows and arrows, but hopefully not an archer like these were, because they could kill you, and they did. So, the battle was fierce against Saul. The archers hit him. He was severely wounded by the archers. And then Saul said to his armor bearer, "Draw your sword and thrust me through with it, lest these uncircumcised men come and thrust me through and abuse me." But his armor bearer wouldn't do that, for he was greatly afraid. Therefore Saul took a sword and fell on it. And when his armor bearer saw that Saul was dead, he also fell on his sword, and he died with him. So Saul, his 3 sons, his armor bearer, all of his men died together on the same day. It's a sad and tragic end to a tragic life. Saul's career as king and leader of Israel began with bright, beautiful prospects. But it all ended in the darkened night of despair when David heard of Saul's death. He mourned. You might think that David would have expected, from him, we might have expected some celebration, because this was his enemy, great enemy, Saul was. But that didn't happen. David mourned. Out of pure jealousy, hatred, and ungodliness, Saul took away David's family, his home, his career, his security, the best years of David's life, and Saul was utterly unrepentant to the end. Yet David mourned, and he wept, and he fasted. When he learned of Saul's death, 2 Samuel 1:11, verse 12, tells us what I just read to you. Therefore, David took hold of his own clothes and tore them. So did all the men who were with him. And they mourned, and they wept, and they fasted until evening for Saul and for Jonathan, his son, for the people of the Lord, for the house of Israel, because they had fallen by the sword. Now, if anyone had a reason to be bitter, full of hatred for Saul, it was David. Some might think that the circumstances demanded that David hate Saul, but he didn't hate Saul. Instead of laughing and dancing at Saul's death, David mourned. And this powerfully demonstrates that our hatred and our bitterness and our unforgiveness are chosen, not imposed upon us. You don't ever have to feel that way about anything. If you choose to feel hurt, oh, I got so hurt, well, get over it. Just get over it. You're going to get hurt all your life. Sometimes you'll get hurt by falling. Sometimes you'll get hurt by people hurt you. If I could tell you the number of times that people have hurt my feelings, I just laughed it off. Because in the early days of our ministry here, there were a lot of people who thought they were better than I, and they may have been. They wanted to take it from me, but God called me to do it. You can't take away what God has done. I tried to explain that to them, though they hated me. Yes, I've been hated. I know you can't imagine anyone hating lovable me. Oh, that's been in a while back, you know. But I'm still here because I did what God told me to do. When I was 8 years old, God told me to preach. I said, okay. That's all I've ever done to make a living. Well, as a teenager, I had a paper route, you know, passing papers from a bicycle. I learned what work is when I had a paper route. I'm sorry there's no paper routes anymore. Big trucks do the whole thing. Your paper comes or, you know, whatever. But I would go around to houses. I had 50 people that needed a paper. And I'd go to the paper office, and I'd get the papers, and I'd get the addresses, and I'd get on my bicycle, and off I would go. And slinging that thing on the porch. Had to be on the porch. If it was on the steps, you got to stop and get off your bike. So I learned how to put it right on the porch. And then on Saturday, you had to go back. On Saturday, I had to go back to these same people and collect the money they owed. Now, for me, this was a revelation. They paid money to get the papers. It was Indianapolis paper, and so they had to pay for that. Of course they did. But the best part of it was they paid me too. The paper people gave me money for doing what I had done. People got their papers because I was faithfully there to do it, and then they paid me. It was the first time in my life I ever made any money. I was just a teen. But I'll tell you, I learned to like it, Mr. Carl. I like money. Now, I like you more than I like money. Don't misunderstand me. I like all of you more than that. But the fact is, I got a real education. And we're talking here about Samuel and David and Ziklag, the Philistine city, where David, he was different. Because in his last weeks there, God brought loving but powerful correction. David humbled himself before God, and God strengthened himself in the Lord. And he won back all that was lost and more. That's in 2 Samuel 2, verse 1. So, it happened that after this, David inquired of the Lord, saying, "Shall I go up to the cities of Judah?" And the Lord said, "Go up." David said, "Where shall I go?" He said, "To Hebron." Yet it was in Ziklag where David inquired of the Lord. Certainly, this was a key to success in David's life. With rare exceptions, he constantly inquired of the Lord. David wanted more than God's blessing on his plans. He wanted to be right in the middle of God's will. May I take a moment to suggest to you that would be a good thing for you to want to do. Be right in the middle of God's will for you. How many of you here, honestly now, believe that God has a will specifically for you? How many believe that? Amen. Boy, I do. And I'm glad you do. Most of you, at least. But it's true. God has you in his sights all the time. He knows the good you do and the bad you do. Good thing about God, he doesn't smack us for the bad, but he'll reward us for the good. God sees everything. And I'm happy about that because we have someone who's watching. We know we have to be careful. Now just think, I'm married to this beautiful girl here. And I like my life, so I would never do this because she would certainly kill me. Let's just say that I met a woman here in the church. Well, Ashley is here today. She's a beautiful girl. And her husband is not available to come to church for a while. And if I said, Ashley, shh, let you and me have an affair. I would have to think a lot about what that actually means. I know the word, have an affair. I'd just have to think about how in the world would that happen. But in spite of that, my goodness, I mean, there are things that we can do and there are things we can't do. And that's what this sermon is kind of about. Samuel, David, Ziklag, Philistines, it all goes together. But it was a different David. A different David. He was different because his last weeks there, God brought loving but powerful correction. David bumbled himself before God, humbled himself. He was bumbled too. To get there, God had to bumble him to get in there, but he humbled himself. I like what I read. He humbled himself before God, and he strengthened himself in the Lord, and he won back all that he had lost and more. 2 Samuel 2:1. It happened after that David inquired of the Lord, shall I go to any of the cities of Judah? And the Lord said to him, go up. David said, where shall I go up? He said, to Hebron. Yet it was in Ziklag where David inquired of the Lord. Certainly this was the key to success in David's life. With rare exceptions, he constantly inquired of the Lord. David wanted more than God's blessing on his plans. He wanted to be right in the middle of God's plan. This is essential for every one of us. We don't ask God to bless our plans. We ask him, what is your plan, mighty God? And then we're blessed to be a part of that. So David asked, shall I go up to any of the cities of Judah? Now David was restored into the Lord. He wondered for some time exactly what it was he was supposed to do, whether he should go back to his homeland. And the next phrase is the key to the whole verse. And the Lord said to him, we see that God was faithful, and he answered David's inquiry. Since David just came out of a period of spiritual decline, well, God could have said to David, you've neglected me a long time. Now I'm going to neglect you until you prove yourself. You're on probation now, and maybe in a month, maybe then I'll start answering your prayers. But instead, the Lord spoke to him and gave him guidance. God is rich in mercy. He loves to bless us if we will but turn to him. The enemy wants you to believe you're not yet fully accepted. You've done so much wrong. Anyone here who is here without sin, raise your hand. Yeah, I can't raise mine either. We do things, particularly when we're kids, stupid. Kid means stupid. It's the same word, stupid kid. I mean, your kids are lovely, and I love every one of them, but they're all kind of dumb. Because they don't know anything about what life is, and they just do dumb stuff. We have a girl back there No offense, my darling, but dumb stuff's going to come from you too. I think she's offended by that. I can tell by looking at her she's offended, and I don't blame her. I'm just saying. Shall I go to any of the cities of Judah? Yes. Yes, the Lord said to him, go back to your homeland. So, the next phrase is the key to the whole verse. And the Lord said to him, we see that God was faithful to answer when David mourned. He asked God, and God said to him, since David just came out of a period of terrible decline, spiritual decline, God could have said, I'm going to put you on probation. I'm not going to talk to you for a while. But he said, nah, that's not the way God works. You've neglected me long enough, so I'm going to neglect you? No, that's not God. You're on probation now. Maybe in a month I'll start answering your prayers. That's not God. That would be your boss. If you work for a boss, if you work, you got a boss. Unless you're me, and I am the boss. But then there she is. She's the big boss. I say that because I would tear my hair out before I would offend my darling wife. So I always ask her, what should I do, darling? What do you think we should do? She's so smart, she'll tell me. If I'm confused about something, I'm not ashamed to say I get confused occasionally about something with which I'm not all that familiar. She'll tell me what to do. That's why she's such a wonderful wife. She doesn't hold it against me. You don't know that simple thing? Well, you idiot. Never. 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 Should I go up to the cities of Judah? The Lord said to him. Yes. And we'll see that God was faithful to answer when David inquired. Because he just came out of a period of spiritual decline, God could have put him on probation. Nope, didn't do that. The enemy wants you to believe that you are not yet accepted. You're not good enough yet. You've done so much wrong. But if you think that way, it means that you're standing before God in what you do instead of what Jesus did. And that's the key. You may think I'm taking a long time to get there, but I've gotten there now. It doesn't matter what you do, it matters what Jesus has done. The generousness of grace means that there is no probationary period with God. James 4:8 tells us, when we draw near to him, he will draw near to us. Therefore, you can come to God boldly, even after a season of spiritual decline. So make this your prayer. Lord, I know my sin and I can't excuse it. I ask you to restore me, for I am heartbroken over my sin. I know that I'm fully accepted before you right now for Jesus' sake and not for mine, and I thank you for what Jesus did for me and who Jesus is to me. Now that's a prayer that'll give you a firm place in which to stand. There's no condemnation in Jesus. We have a God who is rich in mercy, and all of us should be and are forever grateful. The end.